All right. And if you've been with me before, you guys all know technology isn't my strength. So, but we'll get started here. All right, hopefully everybody's seeing my screen. So again, today we're doing indicator 13 and how to put post-secondary time into your schedule. I know that as educators or as district leaders who are trying to help your educators, you all are very busy and your schedules are very tight. And so we're going to talk about some creative ways to get that into your schedule. So really, when we're talking about how do we get post-secondary time into our schedule, we're really talking about those transition activities. It's a required section of the post-secondary section of the IEP. We talked about that in our previous presentations. The transition activities should be meaningful, realistic activities that can be completed during the plan year. Because the goals are written to take place after the student leaves public school, the transition activities are really what we need to think about putting into our schedule and to make sure to make time for. And that this is how our student or the student is going to reach those goals that take place after high school. So first, let's talk about a student's schedule. Service minutes must be based on student need, not a school schedule. So I know that's a lot. It can be difficult to think in that mindset when we're looking at high school, because it's so easy to just say, oh, this kid needs 50 minutes of math SDI because that's how long the class periods are. But really, we need to be thinking about what does the student need. And I mentioned this specifically about post-secondary transition services, because if you have a student who really needs some extra SDI to meet those transition activities, you need to look at that need. Make sure that that's written in the PLAP and how you guys are going to meet that. It's okay to give some SDI to that time if that is a student need. And also think about how your student's schedule and service minutes can be optimized to incorporate these transition activities. They don't have to be standalone activities. You can incorporate them into things and activities you're already doing. And we'll go into that, we'll go into more detail about that in a minute.
So one thing that will help you maximize that is thoughtful partnerships. So when you're talking about your transition planning, you want to consider what transition activities and post-secondary skills are already happening in the student's general education classroom. Like, what are the transition skills that are already in place? What are the skills that the student is already learning? If you take an inventory of what that student is already doing, what gaps need to be filled that could be met through the transition plan? And what ways could you support that student meet those identified needs in their general education classroom? You also another way that you can really maximize that time that you're working on those transition pieces is by sharing and leveraging resources throughout your school community to support students. So that could mean working with the post-secondary coaches, your guidance counselors, or your general education teachers to maximize chances to practice transition skills that students have. We know that when students practice skills in isolation once or twice, they don't master that skill, but the more opportunity that we can give them, the better. So if we have a community that kind of infuses some of those specific identified skills throughout the day, that gives those students multiple opportunities to practice and be better prepared for that post-secondary world. And if you when we look at maximizing those opportunities, how can you embed the skills, like whether you're using some of those skills that a student would need to fill out a job application, like during the bell work, or creating Google Forms that would allow them to practice online form filling out, which is not a skill that you can do all the time in every location. So creating opportunities throughout their day through all of their settings where they can practice that. And kind of that last thought is that there is no one person or agency that can meet the needs of all transitioning students. It takes multiple people. So you need to kind of create that team of experts throughout the students' day and year and time in school to create a way for them to meet all of their needs, to create a rich transition plan for them.
All right, so one of the things, some of the transition activities that you're going to be looking at to help a student be successful post high school are soft skills, functional skills, and executive functioning. These skills and working on these skills really should start in elementary school. I know that that is something that I've said throughout these presentations. Start them young, work with your team so that you're starting students really young on working on these skills. Sometimes by the time they get to high school, none of these skills have been addressed. It can be really hard to get the kiddo going on them. Employers state that new employees are often missing soft skills and functional skills, and it impacts their work performance and sometimes even getting hired. Again, I just can't emphasize it enough to teach these skills early on. So working with those elementary grade teachers, middle school teachers, people who are not, making sure you guys have good, healthy PLCs throughout grade level bands. And teaching these soft skills and functional skills can improve employability. If we think about what makes us successful in our jobs, at the very base, it's that we are able to come to work on time, that we know our schedule, that we're effective communicators, and we have some leadership skills. Those things help us be better at our jobs. Those are things that you seek out in partnerships and collaboration throughout your school. We'd like to see those same skills being taught to our students, especially if they have a skill deficit in that area. We really do need to be addressing that in the path and seeing how we can support those students. So some examples are teamwork, communication, patience, time management, decision-making, and self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is a really big one in high school. Thinking about, can my student advocate for themselves in a workplace environment? Do they know how to say what accommodations that they need? Do they know how to say that they have a disability if they're willing to disclose that information? Those things are really important. And you guys are all great educators. Ask yourself, am I already working on these skills throughout the day? How can I incorporate this into those transition activities? Think about, give yourself credit for the work that you're already doing. Make sure to document the students' progress in those areas, and put it where they have skill deficits in their class.
So like Holly mentioned, teaching soft skills and executive function skills can definitely increase employability for students. And these skills also align very closely with Wyoming's profile of a graduate work, which highlights the skills that students need to successfully learn, work, contribute, and thrive. And I think it's really important to note that the Wyoming State Board of Education identified that academic skills are only a quarter of the skills that required for a student to be successful after graduation. So these skills are super important for that continued practice. And that's why it's very important to align the transition goals and services and activities to support the acquisition of these skills. One resource that I attached to the end of this slideshow that will be available later on the web for you to access is from the Office of Disability Employment Policy. And it's skills to pay the bills. And it works through all of the different soft skills starting from 8th grade on. And it's got a video component too to walk through some of the things we don't always think about with kids. I think a lot about my students who used to use the word "cuz" a lot in their essays. And so just some of those things that they need to think about as they're filling out job applications or certain things. And it's a great resource. So it's all free and it's attached to the end of this for you to check out.
So one of the ways that I think can be really helpful for teams is making those transition activities part of the IEP. I know that when I was a teacher, that held me accountable. A lot of times transition activities, because there isn't required regular progress monitoring, that they can get lost in the shuffle. So a way to hold yourself accountable and make sure that students continue to make progress towards these activities that will help them have better post-secondary outcomes is to actually make them a goal, an IEP goal to support their functional skills and their soft skills. So I just put some examples in here. You know, thinking about a daily planner. I know I survive by my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, I'm probably not going to do it. I'm going to totally forget. Rachel can probably attest to this as a team member of mine. If it's not on my calendar, I'll get a message saying, you're supposed to be here. I can't remember. So teaching students how to use that daily planner so that they can keep track of their, once they leave high school, appointments, meetings at work, interviews, times that the bus will come, those types of things. So you'd want to have an example of, you know, their baseline, how often they are doing it, how many prompts that it might take them, and making sure to let the team know how you're going to progress monitor. On this goal particularly, it says that you'll check it every day. While that's like, sometimes it can be like, oh my gosh, everyday data. It actually, once you get into the flow of it, gives you that opportunity to give that SDI time to that student and to go through it and to have a learning process. And then you can get that nice daily data. And it just becomes a flow that can just take a few minutes at the end of the day. So then given it, I know that this is one that we see students need a lot of help with, is actually asking for help. This kind of goes along with self-advocacy. So again, just looking at how you're going to measure that. And especially with these functional skills, these soft skills, as much data as you can get on it to show where a student is at and make sure that they are making progress is helpful. A couple more examples for like social conversation. It can be done during the lunch hour, right? And you just want to make sure that, like, for a lot of our students, sometimes picking appropriate topics in for their peers and then later on in the workforce is a difficult skill. So think about what time can you utilize outside of a daily schedule. And then a lot of our students, especially students who require more support, really struggle with what to do to make a choice. How can we monitor that and give some SDI for that to help them make choices once they leave high school? In my classroom, we had built-in leisure time at the very end of the period so that students could practice turn taking and making choices. So those are just some examples of how you can put those transition activities or those skills, those soft skills where students have deficits, into IEP goals, and hold yourself accountable to making sure that those activities are done. Another way to look at some skills is to use a banking system or a class economy, depending on which way you want to go. Using these banking systems, it teaches money management, behavior management, math skills, writing, and consequences. One that I used very successfully in my class paid kids a penny for every desired thing that I'd like for the student to do, you know, complete their homework or ask one question or whatever it was that I wanted to see. For every period, they would get a penny if they were able to complete that task. And then we were able to teach the kids how to manage their money, how to spend their money. You'd have kids who'd save, kids who would spend it all right away. But the most meaningful probably thing that happened was many years ago, but it was a student. He came up to me with 5 $1 bills and he said, I need a $1 bill, because I was the banker. And I said, oh, you need a $1 bill? Okay. And I took his $5 bills and I gave him one back because that's what he asked for. He went back and he had a, you know, they kept a ledger of what was in their bank account. And he came back and he said, it's wrong. I'm $4, you know, I'm $4 short or whatever. And I let him correct it and I gave him the $5 bill, but that he never ever messed up on what he asked for again. And that really teaches some of that self-advocacy, making sure that some of our students do not get taken advantage of out in the community when they leave kind of the safety net of public school. So those can really teach a lot of functional skills along with having some positive behavior outcome. I know that Rachel put a resource at the end of our slide about the class economy. That one, I think that particular website, you have to pay rent and pay some bills, I think, which can help help older students for sure start to grasp that concept of budgeting. Another thing that's really important to do and that can help you guys with your scheduling and making sure that some of these transition activities are done is working together with family. Again, students should have small jobs early on. DVR can now start working with a student at age 10. So they have a grant called the DIF grant. So I encourage anyone, working with your younger grades to really help DVR get in contact with those students early on. Talk to families. Are they doing chores at home? If not, how can you help in the classroom to help teach that skill deficit so that they're able to start doing some chores at home? Even if it's simply organizing their desk or organizing their locker or backpack, maybe taking 5 minutes a day to work on that, wiping down a table or vacuuming an area if that's what the family says. Have them give you feedback about how they're doing at home once you start to work on the skill deficit at school. And then I'm going to let Rachel speak a little bit about this next part.
And then another resource that we included in the end really works on supporting parents in understanding the process of transition. The one is from the Transition Coalition, which really looks at engaging with families in a meaningful way. And then the other piece is it's Mapping Dreams, and it's the transition piece. And it really looks at the parents' view of where their student is and some of the questions that they can start asking at a younger age, what their student wants to do, really just connecting them with some of the things that we'll be asking them as educators in the upcoming years to kind of align our work and have us work more cohesively. So those resources are attached at the end of this PowerPoint too.
Thank you, Rachel. Here.
So we've talked a lot about opportunities to practice, and I think we can't say it enough is practice, practice, practice. The more opportunities that we can build for students to practice throughout their day, the better the outcome for that student. So the more collaborative we work as a community of practice within our school, the more chances that these students will have for success moving forward in their post-secondary goals. We talked a little bit earlier about forms that they could fill out, and how could you build that into your progress reporting, having them self-report things using forms so that they have that option to report on their own goals, but they're also practicing the skills of filling out forms, or any other way that they can practice those soft skills with their peers throughout their day. And then start early. Holly said this, and I'll say it too. We know the requirement isn't until that year of their 16th birthday in that IEP, but that transition service and those conversations can begin at any time. And you can encourage those conversations to begin so much earlier. I'll tell you, when I taught 3rd and 4th grade, we started those conversations then, so that parents started thinking about, oh, my kid's going to go on and do something else, because it really connected them to a process of there are things that are beyond the 3rd and 4th grade year, and we are trying to get them from point A to point B. And it also gave me an opportunity as an educator to start working on the vocabulary of transition and give kids practice with self-determination skills early, so that, as Holly said, that they're not going to high school and you're trying to catch up on all these skills that it would have been beneficial for them to learn when they were a lot younger. So start as early as you can. And then think about the skills that students don't get to practice often. I think one of the things with starting the transition process in the elementary school, I was shocked when I had students answering the phone once, and they had no idea how to answer a phone because no one has phones anymore. So that quickly became a job in my classroom, so that they could learn how to answer a phone politely and take a message and make sure that whoever needed to get the message got it. So those skills, or answering questions from people that they don't know, because if you think about some of the job requirements that they may have moving forward in their post-secondary careers, they might have to politely or answer a question or say that they don't know. So again, that self-advocacy skill. And then etiquette things like just saying please and thank you. And I don't, just in ways that they can express themselves to their community in a polite way. So we worked a lot on those skills, and those are skills that you could build into a school day.
And going off of that, it's creativity is really the key to making sure that you have some time in your schedule to work on these skills. You guys are all special educators and you're wonderful at being creative. If you weren't, you probably wouldn't continue to work in special ed. I think it's probably an unwritten requirement. I loved the example that Rachel used about answering the phone in her classroom. Your phone has to get answered, right? Now, how you decide to do that is really up to you as a teacher. So if you want to work on those soft skills with a student, put that in, and that takes no time really out of your day or what you're teaching or the student's day. But it was a creative way to get that skill taught. So think about your day. What am I already doing that I could maybe start taking some data on this student, see how they're progressing, see if they've met this transition service. What needs to be done in my classroom that maybe I could start giving away to students to let them learn these skills. I think the really important thing though is remembering truly the importance of transition. It's the best way to go about when you're thinking about the post writing. I remember when I first went into high school teaching, I was like, oh my gosh, another part of an IEP. This is horrible. They're already so long. But if we can go into that planning process, thinking about this is the ultimate thing. This is what the student has been working for, sometimes from birth, right? If they've started to receive services at birth, and now they're going to leave the supports that they've had this whole time in the public school. This is an incredible weight and importance to high school teachers or to anyone working on transition. So if you can go into that, writing that extra part of that IEP with that mindset and what important work you're doing, it can really help make that creativity process go a lot easier. So you guys, is just a reminder that it's our job as special education teachers to meet all the needs and skill deficits, and that includes transition planning. So thinking again, I know that sometimes, like if it's not on my calendar, I'm not going to do it. If I don't write that into an IEP goal, I might miss it, or I might put it in the back of my, on the back burner, or it might not be something that I prioritize. So finding ways to make sure to hold yourself accountable, hold your student accountable, hold the student's family accountable to that section of the IEP is really helpful. One of the really creative ways you can do this is by using electives or extracurricular activities. Just think about, what is a student interest? What is their job interest? We know through the data that students who are involved in electives that meet some of their needs or interests are less likely to drop out. And obviously we want that. We want to give kids purpose. So think of ways if their job, if whatever their interest is, getting in them into that. And just remember, if it's in the transition section of the IEP, that is part of the IEP, and it's required that all accommodations, that they receive all their accommodations during those times. I know that sometimes the struggle is not with you getting them in those classes, but rather with the elective teachers, especially in high school, right? They are worried about safety. They're worried about the saw. It's about building those relationships throughout the building, making sure that you're communicating with the student, with the teacher about safety or any of their concerns, and you can really end up building really beautiful relationships and seeing how students grow. I remember particularly a student of mine, I signed him up for woodshop, and the woodshop teacher, he stormed into my classroom and he was like, no way I'm not doing that. This is dangerous. This kid, no way. And I just said, I would never put a kid in your class who would be a danger, right? Who's going to put himself or others at risk. This student is not that. The student is going to be successful. He just needs some accommodations, like having the safety test read aloud to him. He said, fine, if he can pass the safety test, he can stay. And I said, okay. And he did, and he ended up doing phenomenally in the class. And the woodshop teacher came up to me later and said, you know what, I really need to apologize. And I also want to welcome him into my woodshop 2 class. That student went on to graduate and he's now gainfully employed. I sometimes run into him and he's really doing wonderfully. And I think a part of that really was the relationship he built with that woodshop teacher and the skills he gained during that time. So just some examples, right? If a student wants to work in a garden center, have them take an agriculture class. If they want to work in customer service, a manager on a sports team, that's a great idea, you know, making sure to utilize those after school programs, 4-H, you know, future farmers of America. I think all of those wonderful after school programs can really help with those post-secondary transition goals. And make sure to help the student get involved in a club of their interest. Let's say there's a club that takes place outside of school hours. Even if you help the student fill out the application or needed paperwork to join that club, it can make a big impact into their post-secondary life. And you can look at, hey, I helped them, I'm working on that SDI of filling out a form, what information to give, making sure, you know, there's lots of scammers out there, making sure that they know how to identify some of that information. Just some examples of how you can incorporate transition into a student's schedule. If they have SDI in math, make the math skills around budgeting and banking. That might mean you're going to take some of the math they're currently working on, looking at what their skill deficit is, and just focusing it more around those transition areas. Same thing with writing, college essays, resumes, but looking at what their actual skill deficit is and how you can incorporate those skills into some of these transition activities. And that might be, you know, once a week, you're taking 5 minutes of SDI and writing to work on that transition service. Read a watch or clock to get to work on time and management and planning. And of course, dealing with their peers and conflict. That's always a topic, right? Is something that you can work on through group projects or those other things. Here are some resources. We definitely talked, Rachel and I talked about some of those. One I really want to point out though as well is life course tools. I know Rachel and I both, you know, really believe, especially in this transition part, that it should be person-centered or student-centered. Life course tools gives a lot of resources to help that planning be more student centered and student planned. They have some wonderful resources and it's all free. And there's that classroom economy one. And some other ones on soft skills and transitions, how to help engage families. Some wonderful resources there for you guys. And of course, please reach out to me at any time if you have any questions regarding indicator 13, that post-secondary section of the IEP. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and open the floor to some questions if you guys have. Okay, well, I just really want to say I appreciate that the people that have come to all of these trainings, one of these trainings, some of these trainings. I know that your schedules are very busy and your time is very valuable. And it says a lot that your dedication to students, that you're willing to come and do these. So I'd just like to thank you all for that. And I always love it when I can give you guys some time back. And if later, if thinking about this, you have some more questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'll also make sure to post on our website on WinWeb the last 3 trainings, their video recorded, along with their PowerPoint presentations. So feel free to access all of those at any time. And thank you guys again for coming. I really appreciate it.